The sun burned mercilessly over the high desert plains, its heat rippling above the cracked earth like smoke over fire. The wind was dry and lazy, sweeping dust across the bones of a town that hadn't drawn breath in over a decade. Caleb "Blackjack" Reed pulled the reins of his horse, the animal snorting as it halted at the edge of a weather-beaten sign that read, "Dry Creek, Pop." 4 to 12. The numbers were faded. Ghost town now. The only thing that stirred was the dust. He wasn't looking for salvation. Caleb hadn't looked for anything in years, just silence and space enough to forget. But then he saw them, 3 small shapes in the dust, just off the main street. They looked like discarded sacks from a distance until one of them moved. He dropped from the saddle in one smooth motion, boots kicking up grit as he approached. Children. 2 boys and a girl, all thin as fence posts, clothes torn and caked in dirt. The girl's face was sunburned, lips cracked. One boy looked barely old enough to stand, and the other lay too still. Caleb knelt, his shadow draping over them like a worn-out shroud. He touched the youngest, the boy who hadn't moved. A wheeze escaped the child's throat. Then, a whisper. "Caleb." His blood turned to ice. The boy's eyes rolled back, and he slumped unconscious again. Caleb stared, heart pounding beneath his duster. He hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in months, not by strangers, not by a child lying half dead in the desert. He scanned the horizon. Nothing but sand and scrub. Who were they? How did they end up here? More importantly, how did the boy know his name? Before we ride deeper into this gripping tale, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. More wild legends await. He lifted the boy carefully into his arms, then turned to the others. The girl opened her eyes and flinched at the sight of him. "It's all right," Caleb said, voice low and steady. "I ain't gonna hurt you." She didn't answer, but she didn't run. That told him enough. The second boy stirred, groaned, and tried to crawl toward the girl. Caleb stepped back, giving them space, his mind racing. They were alone, no wagon, no horses, no parents. Just 3 kids dropped like stones in the dust of a dead town, and one of them knew his name. He looked west, then east. No help out here. Caleb took a breath, long and slow. He hadn't planned on staying, but something was pulling at him, deep and unwelcome. "All right," he muttered. "Let's get you out of this sun." He hoisted the smallest boy back into his arms. The girl hesitated, then followed. Behind them, Dry Creek whispered its secrets to the wind. Caleb Reed never meant to be a savior. He'd ridden through towns like Dry Creek with blood on his boots and bounty on his head. But something in that whisper, his name falling from a boy's cracked lips, had cracked open a door he thought was long sealed. They made it to a weather-beaten shack a mile from the ruins, tucked beside a dead well and shielded by the bleached ribs of a cattle pen. Caleb had passed it before, never giving it thought. Now it became shelter. He laid the smallest boy on a faded blanket, then fetched water from his saddlebag. It was lukewarm but wet. The girl took it without a word, feeding it slowly to her brothers. She moved with care, practiced and calm like she'd done it before, too many times. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. His eyes never left them, but his mind was far away. Caleb "Blackjack" Reed, once the most wanted man in Arizona territory. 8 banks, 12 bodies, 2 betrayals. He'd run with the Black Dust Gang, feared across 3 counties, but that was years ago. Before Keller, before the fire, before he started riding alone. He hadn't fired a gun in months, hadn't needed to. People feared his name more than his bullets. Now 3 kids lay in front of him, and one had spoken that name like it was salvation. The older boy stirred. Caleb watched his eyes flutter open, confusion giving way to panic. The boy tried to rise, but the girl, likely his sister, placed a hand on his chest. "You're safe," she whispered. "Drink first." The boy obeyed. Caleb didn't speak until the girl glanced up at him. Her gaze was sharp, untrusting. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily." "Your brothers?" "Jesse and Eli." Lily's voice was steady, but there was steel in it. She was maybe 10, but she carried herself like someone who'd seen too much. "How long were you out there?" She shrugged. "Don't know. We walked a long time." "From where?" She hesitated. Far. Caleb nodded. He didn't press. He remembered what it felt like not wanting to talk. Besides, he wasn't sure he wanted the answers. He tossed another blanket over the boys and stepped outside. The sun was dipping low now, casting long shadows over the land. He lit a match, lit his pipe, stared out toward the empty horizon. He didn't owe these kids anything. He wasn't a lawman, wasn't a preacher, but something in that boy's whisper had stirred an ache he'd buried long ago. He took a long draw from his pipe, then let the smoke drift upward. Someone out there knew who he was. And if they were looking for him, they might come for the children too. Caleb's hand slid to the revolver at his hip. He'd turned his back on that life. But maybe that life hadn't turned its back on him. The night was mercifully cool. Wind brushed across the plain like a sigh, carrying with it the faint scent of sage and dust. Inside the shack, the children huddled under blankets, their breathing steady but shallow. Caleb kept the fire low. Heat was precious, but so was silence. Lily sat closest to the flames, her eyes locked on Caleb with a wariness that never softened. She didn't flinch at his presence anymore, but trust was still far from reach. Jessie stirred first, coughing weakly. Caleb handed him a tin cup of water. The boy blinked up at him, confused, but took it. Then, as if remembering where he was, his eyes darted toward Lily. She nodded. He drank. "What's wrong with the little one?" Caleb asked, nodding toward Eli. "Fever," Lily said. "We tried to keep him cool." Caleb touched the boy's forehead, hot as a forge. He'd seen fevers take grown men in a day. He stepped outside, dug through his saddlebag, and returned with a tin of willow bark and some peppermint leaves. "This'll help a bit," he said. Lily took it, still watching him like she expected him to vanish. They sat in silence. Then Jessie looked up, his voice raspy. "You got a gun?" "Yeah," Caleb said. "You a bad guy?" Caleb paused. "Used to be." Jessie seemed to accept that, as if the answer explained everything. Maybe it did. It wasn't long before Eli whimpered and stirred. His eyes fluttered open, then rolled toward Caleb. His mouth opened, but no words came. Still, he recognized him. That much was clear. "You said my name," Caleb murmured. "Out in the dirt." Eli blinked, struggling to focus. Lily leaned over him. "It's all right," she said softly. "You're safe now." Caleb turned to her. "How did he know who I was?" She hesitated. "We saw your face once." "Where?" "In a saloon. There was a paper on the wall. Said you were wanted. For murder. Robbery. All that." He exhaled slowly. "That was a long time ago." "You look the same." He couldn't argue. "Why'd he remember it?" Caleb asked. He said, "If we ever got real lost, we'd need someone meaner than the men chasing us." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Who told him that?" Lily looked down. "Our mama." A beat of silence. Caleb swallowed hard. "She said you used to ride with the worst men in the territory. But you turned on them. That meant something." Caleb leaned back, staring into the fire. Memories flashed. A burning barn, screaming horses, a pistol in his hand. He hadn't thought of that night in years. "She said," Lily continued, "if anyone could survive out here, it'd be the outlaw named Caleb Reed." He couldn't speak. The crackle of the fire filled the void. Somewhere in the dark, coyotes howled. Caleb stared into the flames, the past rising around him like smoke. He was no hero. But those children believed he might be, and that belief was dangerous. The fire had died to embers by morning. Caleb sat with his back to the wall, rifle across his lap, boots planted in the dust. The night hadn't brought sleep. Only thoughts, faces, flames. Eli was resting easier now, the fever slowly breaking. Jessie and Lily took turns wiping his forehead, whispering to him softly. Their movements spoke of practice, of long nights alone without help. "You said men were after you," Caleb said finally, his voice low. Lily nodded. "They had brands on their necks, like cattle." Caleb's jaw tensed. "What kind of brand?" Circle with a line through it. The words struck him like a hammer. I know it, he said. Used to ride with men who wore that. Jesse looked up, wide-eyed. Are they a gang? They're worse. He leaned forward, voice tightening. That mark used to mean you took no orders but your own. Outlaws, killers, but now it means something different. Lily's eyes narrowed. They came to the farm, said they were the law. They're not, Caleb said sharply. She blinked, startled. They follow a man named Bram Keller, he continued, his voice like iron. He used to be a marshal, rode with me when we were young, clean badge, clean boots, righteous fury, until he realized justice paid less than blood. Caleb paused, the memory bitter. He turned, built his own posse, branded them like cattle so no one could run. They started snatching land, robbing payrolls, and worse. Jesse's voice was barely a whisper. He killed our pa. Lily put a hand on her brother's shoulder. They came one night, said he owed tax to the county. Mama knew it was a lie. She told them to leave. They burned the house. Caleb closed his eyes. He could still smell the ash, the way wood and flesh smelled when fire took them together. I tried to stop them, Lily said, her voice cracking. I grabbed Pa's old rifle. But it didn't fire. They laughed. Then Mama screamed at us to run. We did. Caleb opened his eyes. You never saw her again? No. He stood slowly, pacing to the door. Bram Keller. The name was a scar. A man who had once called Caleb brother, who had stood beside him in a dozen fights. Until the night he turned, lit the match that burned Caleb's family alive, just to teach him what betrayal felt like. And now Keller was hunting children. I didn't ask for this, Caleb muttered. But we didn't ask for you either, Lily said quietly. He turned to her. She didn't look away. You gonna send us off? She asked. No, he said. Then what? Caleb looked toward the horizon. Then I reckon Keller just made another mistake. The room fell silent. The wind picked up outside, brushing grit against the walls like a warning. The branded men were coming. Caleb could feel it in his bones, and this time he wasn't the one running. At first light, Caleb was already saddling his horse. The children watched from the doorway, silent, still wrapped in their blankets. A chill lingered in the wind, but the sky was wide and gold, stretching forever. We ride east, Caleb said without turning. Town called Ash Hollow. Might be help there. Lily crossed her arms. Why help us? He tightened the cinch. Because no one else will. Jesse stepped forward, clutching a worn satchel. What if they're waiting there? They won't be. Keller's too smart to show his hand that close to a marshal's post. You said he used to be a marshal, Lily reminded him, which means he still knows how they think. He hoisted Eli into the saddle, then helped Jesse climb up behind him. Caleb handed Lily a small pistol before she could ask. You ever use one? She nodded. Pa taught me. Keep it hidden. And only if you must. She tucked it into her waistband and climbed onto the second horse, her legs too short to reach the stirrups. They rode out in silence. Dust curled behind them like memory. Caleb kept his eyes on the horizon, but his thoughts drifted back. To fire, to betrayal, to the night he buried his wife and child beneath a twisted oak tree, while Keller and his men rode away laughing. Redemption had always felt like a lie. The kind priests told dying men to give them peace. Now it felt like a trail with no end. Did you ever have kids? Lily asked suddenly. Caleb didn't answer. I think Eli's going to get better, she said, softer. You saved him. No, he said. I kept him breathing. There's a difference. Still counts. They reached a ridge overlooking a wide canyon, the path below littered with wagon ruts and broken fences. Buzzards circled in the distance. Caleb scanned the land. No signs of pursuit, yet. Why'd Keller turn on you? Lily asked. Because I told him no. To what? Doesn't matter now. She didn't press. Caleb was grateful. They rode into the afternoon, stopping only to water the horses and let Eli rest. Jesse told stories, mostly nonsense, and Lily laughed once. Caleb noticed, but didn't show it. By dusk, they reached a grove of juniper trees. Caleb lit a small fire, just enough to warm hands. He cleaned his revolver in silence, checking every chamber twice. The smell of gun oil mingled with pine. Lily sat beside him, quiet for a long time. "Will you stay with us?" she asked. He looked up. "After." Caleb stared into the flames. The wind howled through the canyon like a cry from the grave. "I can't promise that," he said, "but you'll try." He didn't answer. He just loaded the final round, snapped the cylinder shut, and said, "We ride at first light." Because maybe redemption wasn't found. Maybe it had to be earned, 1 mile at a time. Ash Hollow loomed in the distance by midday, a scattering of buildings clinging to the desert like bones to a corpse. The wind carried no sounds but its own, whistling through open windows and broken shutters. Caleb pulled the horses to a stop at the edge of town. Something felt wrong. He scanned the empty street. No dogs, no smoke. No boots echoing on boardwalks. A town that size should have had life, but all he saw was stillness. "Stay close," he said. "Keep your eyes open." They rode slowly down the main street, passing a shuttered saloon, an abandoned blacksmith's, and a church with a tilted steeple. Caleb's eyes never stopped moving. Behind the general store, a door creaked. He pulled his rifle free. "Off the horses," he whispered. Lily helped Jesse and Eli down. Caleb positioned them behind a trough, crouched low. His instincts screamed. This wasn't just silence, it was waiting. The shot rang out sharp and sudden, tearing through the trough, splintering wood. Jesse cried out, falling to the ground. "Down!" Caleb shouted, firing back at the flash from a rooftop. 2 men appeared from the alley, rifles raised. Caleb dropped one with a clean shot to the chest. The second ducked, rolled, and returned fire. Bullets kicked up dirt inches from Caleb's boots. Lily dragged Jesse behind a barrel, pressing her hand against his leg. Blood seeped through her fingers. "Stay with him," Caleb barked, and charged toward the alley, rage igniting every step. He met the second man head-on, slamming him into the wall. The rifle clattered away. Caleb drew his knife, pressing it to the man's throat. "Who sent you?" he growled. The man sneered. "Keller sends his regards." Caleb's hand tightened. "Where is he?" "Closer than you think." He shoved the man back and struck him with the butt of his revolver. The man crumpled to the ground, out cold. Caleb returned to the children. Jesse was pale, shivering. The bullet had gone clean through the thigh, but it was bleeding fast. Lily was holding firm, tears in her eyes, but hands steady. "Can you ride?" Caleb asked Jesse. The boy nodded weakly. "I think so." "Good. We're not staying." He wrapped Jesse's leg with cloth, tied it tight. Then he checked the rooftops again. The shooters were gone or watching from shadows. Ash Hollow had been a trap. They climbed back onto the horses. Caleb rode with Jesse this time, one hand holding the reins, the other resting on his revolver. They rode hard out of town, not stopping until the buildings were dots behind them. Caleb didn't speak for a long while. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. "Keller's not hunting us." Lily looked up. "He's herding us, and now I know why." The wind howled through the canyons. Ash Hollow was behind them, but Keller was ahead. The sun was low when they reached the ridge above Widow's Hollow, a patch of green clinging to the edge of the desert like a secret. The cabin stood alone among willow trees, smoke curling from its chimney, the smell of sage and stew drifting through the breeze. Caleb dismounted carefully, helping Jesse down with steady hands. The boy winced but stayed silent. Lily rode ahead to the porch, then stopped. Her eyes met those of the woman stepping into the doorway. Eleanor Harrow. Her grey hair was tied back in a loose braid. Her eyes, sharp and dark, flicked from Lily to Jesse, then to Caleb. A moment passed, thick with memory. "I figured you were dead," she said. "Almost," Caleb replied. "You bringing ghosts with you now?" "No, just children." She looked at Jesse, who was pale and sweating, and her face changed. "Inside," she said, stepping aside. "Quickly." They moved fast. Eleanor led them into a cool room where she stripped Jesse's leg, cleaned the wound with alcohol, and stitched it with rough precision. The boy gritted his teeth but didn't scream. Caleb stood back, watching the hands that once held his wife's veil, now working to save another child. Eleanor had been more than kin, she'd been family. And when Caleb lost everything, she was the only one who didn't look at him with hate. Lily hovered close as Eleanor wrapped Jesse's leg. "Will he be okay?" "He's tougher than he looks," Eleanor said, "but he needs rest." They laid Jesse beside Eli, who was now awake and sipping broth. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of a wooden clock and the faint whisper of wind. Eleanor poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Caleb. They stepped outside. "Branded men," she said. "Yes." "And Keller?" "He's the one driving it all." She sipped. "Then you know what that means." Caleb nodded. "He's not chasing anymore. He's drawing me in." Eleanor stared at the sky. "You plan to walk into it?" "I plan to end it." She turned to him. "And after?" "There is no after." The wind shifted. The silence between them held the weight of years, of things unsaid, grief unspoken. "I should have been there," Caleb said. "You couldn't have stopped it," Eleanor replied. "I might have died with them." "That would have been easier," she said, not cruelly, but not better. Inside, the children were finally asleep. Eleanor stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You gonna run again?" "No," he said, "not this time. Then you'll need a plan." "I have one." She raised an eyebrow. "Where he first broke me," Caleb said. "That chapel out on Widow's Rise." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "He won't come alone." "He won't leave either." A long breath passed between them. "Then we better prepare," she said. "So before your ghosts catch up." And in that moment Caleb knew redemption didn't live in forgiveness. It lived in what you were willing to fight for, and who you'd die to protect. Widow's Rise was a hill of cracked stone and scorched earth, its summit crowned by the blackened bones of an old chapel. Long abandoned after fire took its roof and splintered its pews, it stood as a monument to grief, and the place where Caleb Reed had been broken once before. He chose it for that very reason. At dawn, he rode out with Eleanor and Lily, leaving Jesse and Eli behind under lock and rifle. They brought crates from the barn, wire, nails, lamp oil, a few sticks of dynamite saved from mining days. Caleb worked in silence, his hands moving with grim focus. Every trap, every nail had meaning. He showed Lily where to hide, how to shoot, how to breathe before squeezing the trigger. "I'm not scared," she said. "You should be," Caleb replied. They rigged the front pews with tripwire, packed the pulpit with powder. Every shadow inside the chapel held a secret. Eleanor positioned herself behind a shattered window, her rifle balanced steady, and then they waited. The sky burned orange by late afternoon. Thunder rolled in the distance, but no clouds followed. The heat warped the horizon. They came at sundown. 6 riders in a slow line, the lead man dressed in a dust-colored duster, his face half covered in shadow. Caleb recognized the posture before the face. Still tall, still proud, still wearing that crooked smile like he'd never done a thing wrong in his life. Bram Keller. He reined in just outside the chapel, hands resting easy on his saddle horn. "Caleb," he called. "Didn't think you'd come home." "I didn't come to talk." "No, I suppose not." "Still dragging the past behind you?" "You made sure I couldn't bury it." Keller dismounted, his men fanning out. Caleb watched their boots crunch gravel, their hands hovering close to pistols. He stepped out from behind the altar, shotgun resting on his shoulder. "You brought kids into this?" Keller asked, eyes flicking toward Lily's hiding spot. "You brought fire to their home," Keller chuckled. "Still righteous, even after all that blood on your hands." Caleb didn't move. "You came here to finish it, so let's finish it." Keller spread his arms. "Or you could walk away. No one's forcing your hand, brother." "I buried my wife not 50 feet from this chapel," Caleb said, voice tightening. "And you called me brother while you lit the match." Silence fell. Then Keller nodded. "So be it," he signaled. Gunfire erupted. A shot from Eleanor cracked the silence, striking one of Keller's men in the chest. Another tripped the wire and vanished in a roar of dust and flame. Lily fired once, twice, her breath calm and measured. Caleb moved through the smoke like a shadow, every step drawing him closer to Keller. The ambush had begun, but the reckoning was only just starting. The air was thick with smoke and grit. Flames licked the chapel walls, casting wild shadows across splintered pews and broken glass. Caleb moved with purpose, every footstep measured, every breath calm. The noise around him faded. All that remained was the echo of Keller's betrayal, ringing louder than the gunfire. Two of Keller's men lay dead outside, another groaning behind the altar with shrapnel in his gut. Eleanor reloaded quickly, her hands steady despite the chaos. Lily crouched beside the choir bench, lips pressed tight, her pistol now empty. Keller stepped through the broken doorway, revolver raised. Caleb turned to face him. The two men stood in silence, eyes locked. No words, no excuses. Only the long road between them, now ending in gunpowder and grief. Keller fired first. The shot grazed Caleb's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped, rolled, returned fire. His bullet struck Keller's thigh, sending him to one knee. Keller cursed, fired again, missed. They closed the distance, fists met flesh, boots scraped on stone, blood spilled, hot and fast. Keller swung wild, catching Caleb in the ribs. Pain flashed white, but Caleb drove forward, tackling him through the half-burned door of the vestry. They landed hard, weapons scattering. Keller reached first, grabbed his knife. Caleb blocked the strike barely. The blade sliced across his forearm. He grunted, twisted, and slammed Keller's wrist against a beam until the knife fell. "So you always thought you were better," Keller spat. "No," Caleb growled, "just less cruel." He grabbed a broken beam and swung hard. Keller fell back, dazed, blood in his teeth. Outside, gunfire had ceased. The last of Keller's men either dead or fled. Only wind and flame remained. Caleb rose slowly, blood seeping from his side. Keller tried to rise, one arm useless, one leg shaking. "Do it!" Keller hissed. "End it!" Caleb raised his revolver, hand trembling. He saw flashes, Lily crying in the dust, Jesse screaming, Eli whispering his name, his wife's face consumed by fire, his own reflection in a bottle long emptied. Redemption wasn't in vengeance, but justice demanded something. Caleb fired. The shot was clean. Keller slumped forward, dead before he hit the floor. Caleb stood over him, breath shallow, every limb shaking. From behind, Lily appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with worry. "It's done," Caleb whispered. She rushed to him, catching his arm as he staggered. "You're bleeding." "Just a little." "Liar." Eleanor joined them, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. "None left," she said. Caleb nodded, barely standing. The chapel crackled behind them. Wood fell in glowing sheets. Smoke rose toward the twilight sky. He looked back one last time, and then, with Lily's help, he walked away from the ruins. Not victorious, but alive, and for the first time in years, free. Morning came slow to Widow's Hollow, golden light brushing the hills and painting the world in silence. Smoke still lingered on the breeze, faint and bitter. But the fight was over. Inside Eleanor's cabin, Caleb lay on a cot, his side wrapped in clean linen, breath shallow but steady. Lily sat beside him, watching his chest rise and fall like the ticking of a clock that could stop at any moment. Jesse and Eli were curled up nearby, sleeping soundly for the first time in days. When Caleb's eyes finally opened, Lily smiled faintly. "You're late," she whispered. He gave a dry chuckle. "What did I miss?" "Just peace. Nothing exciting." He tried to sit up. Pain flared in his ribs. Eleanor appeared in the doorway before he could fall. "Lay back," she said. "You've done enough." He obeyed, though his pride resisted. "They safe?" he asked. "They are," Eleanor said, "and they'll stay that way." Caleb looked at Lily, then at the younger boys. Something unspoken passed through him, a question, a hope. "I can't raise them," he said softly. "No," Eleanor agreed, "but I can." Silence settled between them. Lily took his hand, small fingers closing around his weathered ones. "You stayed," he nodded. "You fought for us." His voice was barely a whisper. "I owed someone." "No," she said, "you chose us." That truth lingered. Later that afternoon, Caleb stood beneath the willow trees, cane in one hand, saddlebag in the other. His wounds still burned, but the fire in his soul had quieted. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from ghosts, he was walking beside them. Eli waved from the porch. Jesse grinned, leaning on a crutch Eleanor had carved. Lily stood beside them, strong, proud, steady. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Don't know yet." "Will you come back?" Caleb looked at her, then smiled. Small, tired, honest. "If I can." She nodded, unshed tears shining but held back. He placed a silver coin in her hand, old, worn smooth, but heavy with meaning. "That belonged to my son," he said. "Now it's yours." Then he turned, stepping into the dust, into the unknown. Behind him, 3 children watched a man they once feared become the man who saved them. And Caleb Reed walked on, his legend etched not in the crimes he'd done, but in the lives he'd protected. Before we ride off into the sunset, if Caleb's story stirred your soul, hit subscribe. More forgotten legends of the West await. And don't stop here. Another tale's waiting just up the trail. Click the next video on your screen and keep the journey going.